So welcome to our dear participants and welcome to our dear panelists. You can see right now Silja Fischer, Secretary General of the International Music Council, who will moderate this session, and also Marina Ponti, Director of the UN SDG Action Campaign, who will give us a short introduction to the UN SDG, the 70, the whole set of them, and who will also give us some ideas already what is the most important for music in there. And I'm happy to pass on the word to Silja Fischer to take on from here. Have a good session and thanks a lot to be with us.
Thank you very much, Ruth, for this introduction. And my name is Silja Fischer. I'm the Secretary General of the International Music Council. And as I said in my Facebook post, the issue of music and the SDGs is really very close to my heart and is also very close, of course, to the work of the International Music Council and its regional group, the European Music Council. So without further ado, Marina, I give you the floor for your presentation. And I'm sure it will be an exciting presentation for newcomers, but also for people who are already a little bit knowledgeable about the UN Sustainable Development Goals. The floor is yours, Marina.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. It's really a delight to be here to discuss the importance of the Sustainable Development Goals and the very crucial relationship with arts, creativity, and music specifically. We are here today to talk about the Sustainable Development Goals, which are, as shown in the video, 17 goals that were agreed in 2015 by all government and also by many leaders from the private sector, from the civil society across the world and really across the different constituencies. At the UN, as you may know, in many other occasions, even before that, many goals were set. But the Sustainable Development Goals had a revolutionary thought in themselves. And I wanted to show you which are the three revolutionary ideas behind them. These goals that, first of all, they range from, fighting poverty, inequality, fighting discrimination, creating transparent and functioning institution, health, education, decent jobs, climate action, protecting the environment by biodiversity. So they really cover all aspects of life. The three ideas which were and are revolutionary are the following. The first is that for the first time at the United Nations, these goals were set as universal. So for the first time, when we talk about education, when we talk about gender empowerment, when we talk about fighting social exclusion or fighting inequalities, these goals were not set only for the poorer countries, were not set for Africa to invest more in education or in healthcare or in infrastructure. These goals are for every country, from the richest to the poorest, to be achieved, because it was recognized that the issues are the same, that the vision for the future should be the same. So the universality is the first factor for the first time ever. And the second is about the interconnection. In the past, many times at the UN or in other fora, there were conferences, maybe one conference about the environment, and then one conference about women empowerment, and then very specific sectorial goals were set. And then the ministry in charge of that sector would then follow up and try to integrate and implement the policies or the action. For the first time, it was recognized that all these issues are interconnected. And I think that the pandemic, that with all the challenges that brought to us, has made this interconnection very clear. I think we saw it very clearly with COVID, how health can impact mobility, jobs, violence against women, education, the environment, and even some, civil rights. So somehow it was already clear in 2015 that we cannot achieve the goal about climate if we don't look into, at the same time, we look about jobs, we look about gender equality, we look about education, we look about fighting the deep inequality that exists in our society. So the interconnection. And the third element, which is very clear if you read the whole preamble to the Sustainable Development Goals, is about the boldness. So it was very clear in 2015 that to achieve a greener and a more inclusive and a more fair society by 2030, we needed to rethink our society, the way societies are built, the way power, wealth, knowledge is shared and distributed, and the very way, our production, the way we produce, the way we earn, the way we consume, everything had to be rethought. So the boldness factor was already there. And many people, so we had this very transformative agenda in 2015, but what happened is that many people, and I can be counted in this group, were extremely inspired and were hoping that for the first time, government and leaders will really take the opportunity to change things, or how we call it, to turn it around. But this really didn't happen. And now, despite the fact that we had a raging pandemic, which is still not over, that somehow made us go back on the various issues. If we look at education, if we look at jobs, if we look at gender empowerment, if we look at health or inequality, although we went backwards because the pandemic further aggravated many of the problems in our society, we feel that there is a lot of optimism, because now, for the first time, I think in many decades, governments, the private sector, societies, both at the macro level and at the individual level, were forced to stop, to freeze, to be on hold. And now everyone is back at the drawing board to reimagine, to redesign jobs, mobility, renewable energy, production, consumption, food systems. So everyone, including the music sector, which was very deeply touched by the pandemic, as many other, are back redesigning how to restart, how to reimagine things. And somehow we see this as a very important opportunity to turn things around and to change. And in a second element is also that in many parts of the world, not everywhere, but definitely in Europe and definitely in North America, in other regions, beyond the policy space, there are also resources available for the public and for the private sector to really make these new plans for more fair and more sustainable society, to make them happen. And this is why we say that we, despite the pandemic, we're very optimistic, and we need to all be together and push so that 2021 can really be a turning point for people and the planet. Now, let's move to the music sector. And I was talking about those three issues before, the revolutionary ideas behind the goals: universality, interconnectedness, and boldness. And I think the music encapsulates those three as well. Everybody knows that the music is a universal language. And through music, we can really speak and we can really share a vision for a better future. The interconnection. Music unites us. It's a way in which we can communicate emotion, fears, and aspiration. And music actually brings us together, not just a concert, but the way we listen to music, which is actually the audience of music is the largest audience of any, creative, art. And the third is about boldness. Music can give us, and through history, music has given us the strength, the resilience to cope with the issue and the challenges of our societies. But music has also given us the strength to change the things we need to, and we have to change in our life, individual, and also in our, in our communities. So we believe the music is critical for achieving the SDG, because music can inspire each one of us to change, and the music sector, as all the other sector in our society, can also change itself so that incorporates, the Sustainable Development Goals, which are a social and climate justice pact between people and their societies, and start incorporating more, gender equality, more women on stage, but also in the management roles, or more sustainability in events, more safety, more events that are inclusive and that they don't produce waste. So there are so many things that the music can do. Let me close with a couple of examples. We're working with Shain Shapiro, who will be speaking after me to create this, which has been launched, an SDG music network of artists, but also individual, and everybody who wants to really change the music industry so that it really help to pursue these goals. And also us as an SDG action campaign, every year we recognize through the Sdg Action Awards the most innovative change maker that are advancing change in their society using creative tools. And in many years, one of our winners are from the music sector. And this year we recognize the Rap to Rap initiative from Liberia, where young musicians are leveraging music to really achieve social change at the community level, and are inspiring people, and particularly young people, to take action and confront the things that need to be changed at the local level. So I hope I kind of convey this message that the SDG are about this social contract between people across generation, and also between our planet, which we share and we need to preserve for ourselves and our future generation. So and music can really help to give us the vision, to give us the energy, to unite us and to inspire us that this transformation is possible, and is possible now, and can start from each one of us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mariona, for this very inspiring presentation, which offered a perfect kickoff to our panel discussion, which I have the pleasure to moderate now. But before I invite co-panelists to join, I would like to take us on a journey to Greece, where a choir project is actually implementing all the values that you have been talking about, which are embedded in the SDGs. I am very grateful to our member organization, the European Choral Association Europa Cantat, for having suggested this video to our attention, and I invite my colleagues to launch it now. Thank you.
Και πέφτει το δεξί μου χέρι, πέφτει και το αριστερό και πέφτω πίσω.
Για μένα η πολυφωνικά στη ζωή μου πάρα πολύ σημαντική. Άλλαξα χαρακτήρα από ποτέ τη γνώρισα. Αισθανόμαστε μια οικογένεια, ενωμένη. Δεν νιώθουμε κάτι διαφορετικό ανάμεσά μας, ποιος είναι καλύτερος, ποιος είναι χειρότερος. Νιώθω ότι είμαι με άνθρωπους λιγάκι σαν και εμένα.
Ένα και! Σαν σακρομάνι νεγούο τσετσεκο κομμά, σαν σακρομάνι νεγούο πολυφωνικά.
Αυτό που είναι το δυνατό μας σημείο είναι ο διαπολιτισμικός χαρακτήρας της πολυφώνικα. Ξεκινήσαμε με μια ομάδα 15 παιδιών και τώρα έχουμε φτάσει τα 120 περίπου, τα οποία προέρχονται από 20-22 διαφορετικές χώρες.
Εγώ είμαι από την Πολωνία. Και εγώ είμαι από τη Ρουμανία. Είμαι από την Ουκρανία, από τη Ρωσία, έχω λιγάκι από τη Μολδαβία και Κύπρο. Είμαι από τη Ρουμανία και γεννήθηκα στην Ελλάδα.
Είμαι από Νιγηρία. Είμαι μισός Λιθουανός, μισός Τούρκος.
Είμαι από την Πολωνία, από το Γκνιέσνο. Εγώ είμαι από τη Ρωσία.
Με λένε Ντομινίκ, είμαι 10 χρονών και είμαι από την Γκάνα.
Στη χοροδία δεν παίζει ρόλο καθόλου η θρησκεία, τι χρώμα δέρματος, ματιών, πώς μιλάει ο άλλος, τι πρόβλημα έχει. Όλα είναι σαν όλοι να είμαστε σαν στην ίδια χώρα, στην δικιά μας χώρα, στη μουσική χώρα.
Well, there it is, the transformative power of music, I would say, right on our doorstep. A really strong illustration of how music can foster the integration of and also the dialogue among youth with diverse cultural backgrounds, which, as I said, echoes the objectives of several SDGs. I can think immediately of inclusive societies or reducing inequalities, and I let you think more. Well, in order to dive deeper into the topic of the interrelation between music and the SDGs, I would like to ask the panelists to join me by opening their cameras and mics, or first the cameras, so we can see everybody on the screen. Hello, hello. And Jordi, if you could switch on your camera. Well, let me start with thanking Marina for staying with us after your presentation. For those who join us late, Marina Ponti is the director of the UN Sdg Action Campaign based in Bonn, Germany. I am very pleased to welcome from Brisbane, Australia, from down under, Brydie Leigh-Bartleet, director of the Queensland Conservatorium Research Centre at Griffith University. Welcome, Brydie. Brydie serves currently as president of the Social Impact of Music Making Research Platform. And I'd like to add that we met when Brydie was chair and commissioner of ESMI's Community Music Activities Commission. I think it was in Edinburgh. A warm welcome to you, Shain Shapiro, founder and executive director of the Center for Music Ecosystems. Shain is also the founder and group CEO of Sound Diplomacy, the leading global advisor on growing music and nighttime economies in cities and places. Sound Diplomacy is a member of the European Music Council and thus also of the International Music Council. And Shain, I think our relation also goes back decades, I would say, back when you were still in Canada. And finally, I hope, I don't see him, but I hope Jordi is there too. Jordi Pascual, welcome. Jordi is the coordinator of the Culture Committee of an organization called UCLG, which stands for United Cities and Local Government, which is together with the IMC and other cultural global networks, a member of the Culture 2030 Goal Campaign Steering Group. Jordi, a warm welcome to you.
Thank you very much.
As I said, I'm truly pleased to moderate this panel. It's a topic, it's close to my heart, it's close to our work, and it's important for all of us. And I have actually adopted a tagline that I heard in another panel a few years ago. The Agenda 2030 of the United Nations is the to-do list for the world, and now for the next 9 years. It's no more and it's no less. The aim of our panel today is to give life to the SDGs, which in the minds of many people remain rather abstract, a bit less thanks to Marina's presentation. Thank you. I'm sure that our panelists can indeed illustrate what the SDGs can and do mean for the music, the cultural sector, and how we can be actually in the driving seat for the next agenda for sustainable development. Brydie, let me start by asking you to share with us some insight into the Music as a Global Resource Compendium 2020, of which you are the co-editor. So how does this compendium establish the link between music and the SDGs?
Thank you so much, Silja. It's a wonderful opportunity to talk a little bit about music as a global resource. And greetings to you all from Brisbane on Jagera and Turrbal country in Australia. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. I had the great delight of co-editing the Music as a Global Resource Compendium with my fabulous co-editor, Professor Barbara Hesse from New York University. And this was actually the 5th edition of the compendium, which we released at the end of last year in celebration of the 75th anniversary of the United Nations. As Angelique so eloquently said in her keynote yesterday, with the world coming to grips with the impacts of the current pandemic, the need for music and the arts and cultural understanding is greater than ever. And what our compendium really powerfully tries to demonstrate is that musicians, cultural organisations, NGOs, and in some cases governments are heeding this call and harnessing music's capacity for engaging diverse populations in addressing some of the most complex challenges facing our generation. What our compendium does is it documents this work on a global scale, and we feature case studies of 109 different projects across 54 countries. And these projects are addressing pressing social, cultural, health, educational, environmental, and economic issues. And when you view them collectively, they're actually highlighting and addressing and advancing all 17 of the UN's SDGs. Each project in our compendium we showcase using a program logic, which comes from international development, where we try to make a little bit more explicit how the music projects actually achieve their outcomes and flow on to broader impact in the SDG areas. And what the projects also show is that music is operating on a micro level, a personal, interpersonal level, but also on a meso group and community level, and flowing upstream in some cases to macro policy and broader systems change. Our compendium is organised into 5 different sections which all closely align with the SDGs, and these range from music for physical and mental health and well-being, which is SDG 3, to music for quality education and lifelong learning, which is SDG 4. We also have a number of projects that look at music for social justice and equality, which of course highlights SDGs 5 and 10. And also music for cultural, community and environmental sustainability, which relates to SDGs 8, 11, 13, 14 and 15. And then lastly, our 5th section looks at music for peace building and surviving trauma, which relates to SDGs 1, 2 and 16. And I'd be happy to give you some examples in the discussion of the sorts of projects that are featured in each of these areas. What these examples really powerfully show is that music making plays a key role in translating the universal language of the SDGs that we've just heard about from Marina into individual and collective lives of citizens in specific communities and cities and regions. And this is a process that the Culture 2030 Goal Campaign terms cultural localization of the SDGs. These examples and sections I've just described from the compendium give rise to 5 very quick provocations I thought I might throw out to the panel for further discussion to see if they resonate with the other panelists. The first provocation I want to make is that I don't believe music is a magic bullet. It cannot address any one of the SDGs on its own because we know music does not operate in isolation. It accumulates its meanings and identities from the ways in which it participates in other activities. And so while music might not be a magic bullet, I do think it can be a crucial and very distinctive piece in the puzzle when addressing the SDGs. The second provocation I want to say is that people are drawn to music because of its intrinsic value, not because it's good for the SDGs. You don't join a choir because it's good for SDG 3. People are engaging with music because it provides them with meaning and a distinctive type of pleasure and emotional stimulation. These intrinsic values are very satisfying in and of themselves. But many of them lead to individual capabilities and social outcomes that do have very compelling instrumental benefits in relation to the SDGs. So I think in this conversation, it's always important to remember that music is a cultural and creative activity that has both intrinsic as well as instrumental value. The third point I want to make is that music initiatives working towards the SDGs also need to work with the cultural assets of communities. I think the notion of helping disadvantaged communities can sometimes get frequently evoked in the rhetoric of music projects that are seeking to advance the SDGs, and can sometimes manifest in these sort of welfare-like narratives that promulgate damage-centered approaches to development. Such approaches work on this very faulty assumption that because people who suffer from inequalities and injustices also lack music and culture, which of course is not the case. So when it comes to advancing the SDGs, I think we need to shift emphasis from music fixing problems to a far more strengths-based approach that actually works with the cultural assets of communities. The second last provocation I want to throw out there is that we need to get far better at integrating music into the backbone of cross-sector initiatives that address the SDGs. Across the world, there are a number of place-based initiatives that are tackling the SDGs that bring together a diverse range of stakeholders and sectors to work collectively. And while sectors that are part of essential services routinely are part of these efforts, we've seen that music and the broader arts sectors are rarely integrated into the backbone of these initiatives. And from what I've observed through the work on the compendium is that more work needs to be done in bringing a creative turn to these sorts of collective place-based efforts. And then lastly, this won't surprise you coming from a researcher, we need more systematic research in this field, and it's fantastic to see publications like the one that Shain's worked on and many others emerging around the world. Many of the projects in our compendium have been screaming out for more funding and more research. Specifically, we need to understand far more about how the process of engaging in music actually works towards the SDGs and flows upstream to the sorts of macro systemic level changes that really make a difference and bring about broader social change. The challenge for future research is that we need to think holistically about how the aims and assumptions and musical practices in these projects actually lead to the musical outputs and social outcomes, and then flow upstream to these bigger social development goals as well. And there's an important piece for research in all of that. So I hope some of these reflections and observations from our work on the compendium might be useful in discussions around the intersection of music and the SDGs, and I'd be happy to share more examples of projects in the discussion if it's of interest. Thank you, Silja.
Thank you very much, Brydie, for this really inspiring journey that you took, which you took us on with you across a little bit about the compendium, across the different angles from which you approached the compendium, the collection of the projects. I noted 109 case studies from 54 countries. What a work. I also noted a clear reference to, or an echoing of what we have as a holistic approach to music, acknowledging very much, of course, its intrinsic value, and you have very well described what this means, but also acknowledging the fact that music has an economic nature, but also that it has, that it can serve as a tool to promote individual development and a lot of other things. And once again, you have very well developed this this instrumental aspect, let me say, of music. Thank you so much. Also, I think we will go back to the question of localization in our panel discussion. We will go back to this issue of from the individual through the community to a more macro level, and also the political level, which is very important, of course, for organizations such as the European Music Council and the International Music Council. So a lot of inspiration, I think, for our panel discussion. And before we start the discussion, let me give the floor to Shain Shapiro. The Center for Music Ecosystems adopted a somewhat similar, somewhat different approach to this topic of the intersection of music and SDGs. And may I thus invite you to share this approach that you took with your very recent publication. Shain, the floor is yours.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for having me. I have to say, Brydie, your report was a huge influence on what I wrote. I had it open all the time. So again, thank you. So yeah, I'm based in London. Just a few months ago, I launched a new NGO called the Center for Music Ecosystems. For the last 8.5 years, I've been working for a company I set up called Sound Diplomacy. And what I discovered at Sound Diplomacy, or at least from my perspective, was really we weren't advocating for ourselves, we were advocating for music. So we had to really explain that music had value, be it economic, social, cultural, in order to get our clients, cities, governments, large organizations to invest. They weren't going to hire us if they didn't see music as being valuable, right? And I spent 8 years talking at a wall that was slowly crumbling. And from my perspective, I felt that there was a language that we weren't speaking, or maybe some people were speaking in certain ways, but there wasn't kind of a collective initiative or a collective voice. And I think that, so I thought, why don't we try to marry the universal language with the universal language of sustainability? And the thing that the SDGs brought to me was not just the 17 SDGs, as Marina said, but the 169 targets and indicators underneath those SDGs, that there's actually a set of there's a data set behind how you measure things. And in music, when we're talking about how to argue for our value, whether that, again, be economic, social, or cultural, and so as you know, my day job is more focused on economics, but my heart is in social and cultural. I felt that there would be the best thing that could be offered is to try to create a little bit of understanding that links music in one way or another to every single one of the SDGs. So I approached Mariona quite a while ago, and I said, "Do you want to write this together?" This was before the pandemic, before the Center for Music Ecosystems existed, and then over the last year and a half, I have been chipping away at it, trying to find examples from all over the world that demonstrate how music meets one of the 169 kind of targets beneath the 17 SDGs. So that is a report. It's called Your Guide to Music in the SDGs, and it was the launch report of the center. The center's objective is to be exactly what Brydie just said, is to try to be a research institution to further the value of music globally. SDGs and issues related to human development, gender equality, and climate are part of our research objectives. So the center is aiming to try to fill that gap, is to try to be a unbiased global research institution, completely separate but complementary to everyone and everything, to try to provide more kind of meat onto the bones of this question. And we're doing another project with the UNDP right now. We're doing a project with the Nordic Culture Fund and speaking to other kind of global organizations. And the objective with this is using the SDGs to kind of create a dictionary and a thesaurus to explain the value of music in whatever language we need to speak. Be it how donor countries invest in projects in recipient markets, to make sure that every school that's built has a music room attached to it, for example, that when we look at investments in infrastructure, we factor in the needs of music, performing arts and culture, and so on and so forth. And so the guide is not meant to be in any way, is not meant to be overly thorough. It's completely impossible, I feel, to do that. It's not meant to be definitive either. I think it was really just meant to be, I guess, a provocation or an introduction to trying to link music deliberately and intentionally to every single SDG. And I completely understand that some of them are slightly more difficult than others. Linking music to life below water is slightly more difficult to gender equality. But the more research and the more digging and the more people that I spoke to through Mariona and her team, other friends at the UN and the OECD and other organizations, is music does intersect with everything. And you're right, Brydie, music is not the sole solution, but music is part of every solution. And if we incorporate music into how we think about how to make life better, how to invest in people, how to invest equitably, and how to really recognize that all culture, regardless of where it is, has value, then music can be a net benefit, right? And so the guide is available for everyone to read. Thank you, Katharina, for putting the link. And really, this is just the start. So right now, we're working on a number of concept notes, presenting it to potential funders. There are some people, that I'm staring at right now on the screen that I'll be bothering more over the next few months to try to get things moving, to try to really, draw a proper line in the sand to say music deserves the same level of research, and music in all its forms and functions across social, cultural, and economic, linking specifically to the SDGs, so that the investment in music is part of how we think about investment in humans. Because usually it's an afterthought. It's a thing that happens after you've invested. Once you've built the city, then you put a venue in it. No, I want the venue to be part of the master plan of the city, right? From the initial drawings, for example. So thank you for having me. And yeah, for those who want to download it, obviously just go to the website. There's an executive summary if you're really busy as well, if you don't want to read all 120 pages of it. Yeah, and I'm, super honored and privileged to be part of this discussion.
Thank you very much, Shain. Thank you for mentioning the need for investment in music. Thank you for mentioning the need to really further the value of music across societies, across sustainable development. You underlined that your research is unbiased. You underlined that you wanted to explain really the value of music through the SDGs. And also I noted that you wrote also in your guide that it's not meant to be thorough or comprehensive. It's meant to be collaborative and complementary, and I think that's also very important. And thank you for saying that music is part of every solution. Very important too. I know that UCLG and the Culture 21, the Culture Committee of UCLG, is one of the supporters of this guide, and this gives me a nice transition, to invite Jordi to the floor. Jordi, we have just seen how two examples really from the music sector through project and as an ecosystem can advance the realization of the SDGs. Your global organization, the United Cities and Local Governments, have taken a strong stand when it comes to recognizing the role of culture as fourth pillar of sustainable development. And because of this position has been a driving force in the Culture 2030 Goal campaign. So could you please first elaborate on the position and actions of UCLG in this respect?
Thank you very much, Silja. It is a huge privilege. I feel so happy to be in this panel. Thank you very much for the invitation, European Music Council and Silja. Yes, in 2010, now 11 years ago, United Cities and Local Governments, the World Organization of Cities and Local Governments, the voice of local governments to the United Nations, we approved a policy statement saying culture is the fourth pillar of sustainable development. Why? Because we are convinced that the triangle does not explain reality. The triangle, economic growth or economic considerations, because there are also economic actors that are convinced that degrowth is part of the solution. This was a footnote. The triangle, economic growth, social inclusion, environmental balance, does not explain reality. And when paradigms do not explain reality, we have not only the possibility, but the duty to challenge the paradigm. The paradigm does not work at a global level. We are in a diverse world. The relation between nature and human have given outstanding, beautiful incarnations, cultures in plural, and we cannot understand the future of the world, the future of the next generations, unless there is a huge, bolder recognition of cultures in shaping how the world should be in the future. It doesn't work for nations and cities. When you think of memory, heritage, creativity, diversity, transmission of knowledge, rituality, how we celebrate life, how we celebrate seasons, we do it with culture. We do it with music. We do it with dance. And this is happening all over the world, in all our jurisdictions. It needs clear recognition, explicit recognition. And of course, the paradigm does not work at an individual level. We have noticed it in a very acute way during the pandemic. In a society that cares for all, the human development, our capacities to understand the world, to feel fragile, to cry, to mourn those that have left, to invent new things. This is what makes us human. Culture, this is a quote from a Catalan writer, Albert Sánchez Pinyol. He says, culture it does not make us better humans. It makes us human. And any development agenda that does not explicitly address this fundamental question on human dignity is a global agenda that needs to be challenged, completed, again, met what we are and feel what we are as beings, as human beings. So this is why in 2010 we approved that policy statement. This is why we have been promoting this narrative. Of course, culture, the fourth pillar, perhaps better dimension or a sphere to make it a bridge, a connecting bridge among the up to now 3 recognized dimensions of sustainable development. Probably spheres is nicer. One of the, and I will finish with this part immediately. One of the reasons the 3 dimensions do not work properly is because the cultural dimension is not explicit. When it is explicit, when cultural actors have a seat at the table, when cultural considerations are explicitly in the roadmap for the future of communities, then the other 3 dimensions can work much better. So our struggles in UCLG still are to advocate for this narrative and to translate this narrative in concrete actions, localizing the SDGs with the involvement of cultural actors, with clear commitments, with clear budgets, with clear responsibilities on the cultural dimension of development, not only by the cultural actors, but also in schools, in urban planning, in health services, etc. So this, I would say, explains why we in UCLG have been struggling for culture as a dimension of sustainable development. We published several documents, one in 2018, a guide on local action, and then also our observatory of good practices with more than 230 now, all of them indexed according to the 17 SDGs. We have now a new program, the 7 Keys, that helps cities and local governments to localize the SDGs with a cultural perspective. And last but not least, the Rome Charter. I was very happy to listen to Brydie on capabilities, the Rome Charter on the right to participate fully and freely in cultural life, further develops this connection between human development and sustainable development with 5 key cultural capabilities.
Thank you, Jordi. This was very complimentary, I think, to our first panelists, Brydie and Shain. Thank you for explaining why you felt that there is a need to challenge the current paradigm and really call for a bolder recognition of culture in shaping our world and our diverse world.
Can I briefly explain also the Culture 2030 Goal campaign?
I think we will come to this.
Okay.
Later? Okay. Thank you. Indeed, we hear you a paradigm that does not work at individual level. Culture is what makes us human. And with this, that the development agenda needs to address also the cultural dimension of development, and that we as cultural actors need to have a seat at the table, and that without the cultural dimension, the other 3 dimensions will not be complete. And I also noted the work of UCLG for the localization of the SDGs. And maybe you can share, oh yeah, wonderful, you just did it. Share the documents that you just mentioned, and indeed the Rome Charter. I think for all of us who are very much concerned about the right to freely participate in cultural life, please have a look at the Rome Charter. It's a very, very interesting and important document. Marina, so we had 3 very inspiring presentations from different but also similar angles. Please, Marina, would you like to share your feedback from what you heard so far? And also related to the optimism that you mentioned, but also the need to inspire governments and politicians, policymakers to take action?
So first of all, I really enjoy listening, to this presentation, and I really agree with many things, most of the things that were said. So it's not more so much about reacting; it's maybe pointing out, some of the things that were said that they're very important. I think going back to my optimism, we've seen with the pandemic, at the beginning. When the pandemic hit very hard, there were the first lockdown, how people really leverage music to lift hopes, and we've seen all these videos of individual playing in their balcony and using music to express hope and to express solidarity, somehow to express a shared vision. And to communicate with each other. We're close in our home, but we are united. And to me, those images really show what Brydie and other we're saying about how we can really feel interconnected through music, and we can convey a message of hope and of togetherness, which is very important. And also at the same time, I think going back to the old discussion about governments not prioritizing culture, talking about urban planning, but also budgetary decision, and also at the UN setting goals. I think that the pandemic helped because it put the spotlight on the impact of closing cultural venues, closing museum, but closing music hall and movie theater, and kind of made realize more and more people of the impact, positive of culture when it's there, and of the very negative impact of not having cultural, venue or opportunities, that we all suffer from during the pandemic. So I see a window of opportunity in terms of the awareness and the kind of a voice of cultural institution has been raised to a very high visibility. So there is perhaps a momentum now to leverage the visibility of culture and to make sure it's translate in those plans that are reimagining our future. So I really feel there is a momentum there. I really couldn't agree more with this beautiful quote, Jordi, about music and culture makes us human. And as when the first concept of human development, was created in the 90s, for the first time, it was not just about growth, but it was about health and education. This kind of new concept of people being able to fulfill their potential and to being able to achieve a more comprehensive life. I think culture is now a very important element, and I'm also a big fan of the Rome Charter, and also culture can really enhance people, but there is also a kind of a human rights framework that we need to protect, and we need to allow people to be able to express in so many society, this kind of expression, language or the diversity is just not feasible. So I think we need to also recognize that we don't want culture or music to be a luxury of those who can, enjoy, listen, and express themselves, while many in many society is just that possibility to listen and to create music is just not there. So I'll stop here.
Thank you very much, Marina, also for recalling the human rights aspect of our discussion. And with your indulgence, this makes me absolutely think, of course, of the 5 music rights proclaimed by the International Music Councils, which address issues such as freedom of musical expressions for all, access to a diverse music education for all, access to participation, involvement in music, with music for all, and for musical artists, their right to training, to equipment, to media, access to media, their right to being recognized as an artist, and also be fairly remunerated for their work. So thank you. With your indulgence, I had to make this little trip to our rights-based approach. Marina mentioned the momentum of the pandemic that really posed a great challenge for the culture sector. I know that the compendium, Brydie, has one chapter that looks at the impact of the pandemic on all these projects that you have looked at. Before going to you, Brydie, I would like to ask Jordi. Jordi, I know the Culture 2030, I very well know, of course, Culture 2030 Goal Campaign issued a statement about the need for culture to be in the center of the response globally to the pandemic. And this is maybe the time where you could talk about the Culture 20 Goal Campaign and especially this statement.
Yes, thank you very much, Silja. In fact, the campaign is a new one. We were somehow born in 2019, 2020. It has a precedent, the Culture 2015 Goal Campaign that we launched together in 2013, 14, 15 with 4 documents. The first one advocated for a culture goal, and we even wrote 10 targets for that possible goal. And the final document of that campaign was released exactly on the same day of the approval of the SDGs on the 25th of September 2015, with the title "Progress Made, but Important Steps Remain Ahead." And when in September 2019 we reborn the campaign, we did it with a report that analyzed the implementation by member states of the SDGs with the cultural perspective. We analyzed the reviews, the national voluntary reviews sent by member states of the UN to the high-level political forum in 2016, 17, 18, and 19. We conclude, yes, some countries are taking this seriously, some others are not taking the opportunity to implement the SDGs with a cultural perspective, to involve cultural actors in the national plans to implement the SDGs, to assign specific responsibilities to cultural actors, to cultural practices, so that the SDGs can be effectively achieved, implemented, localized. And in April 2020, when we were suffering the acute consequences of the COVID-19 crisis, we wrote a statement recalling that music, dance, heritage, cinema is part of our life of humans, and that the sectors, the cultural practices need to be at the center of the recovery. This is what we state. We have committed to act as a strong global advocacy campaign to push for the implementation, to guarantee that culture is mainstreamed in the global development agenda, to carry on publishing statements and reports. This year, 2021, we're preparing a report on the voluntary local reviews, the reviews that spontaneously have been written by cities and local governments. A little bit more of involvement, but not that much as we had supposed. So there's room to improve also in cities and local governments. And we believe in our number of goals of the campaign. We believe that it would be a good idea that there is a global agenda for culture, as the Special Rapporteur on Cultural Rights is promoting. It is good. It is a good idea that the UN bodies, including UNESCO, but not only, led by UNESCO, but with the involvement of other bodies, takes the opportunity of the Multi-Cult Plus 40 conference next year, 2022, in Mexico, to set an ambitious global cultural agenda, if possible, based on cultural rights, if possible, acknowledging culture as the fourth pillar of sustainable development, if possible, making a nice balance between poetry and prose. And with poetry, I mean, yes, nice words, but with prose, we mean clear involvement of cultural actors in any national and local development plan for the recovery and for the achievement of the SDGs. So this is what we have committed to do, and we count on your support, meaning all the participants. We are, I feel privileged of being working with the International Music Council as a key member of the Culture 2030 Goal campaign. So my gratitude to the IMC and to the EMC for this great partnership we have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jordi. I think we are equally privileged and happy with this partnership, and we can reassure you of our continued commitment. Thank you also for having given us the opportunity to address the UN high-level event on the 21st of May at the UN General Assembly. This was a great occasion. Thank you very much. Brydie, I would like to go back what Marina said about, once again, the pandemic. And as I mentioned, the compendium has tried to also to look at the positive, but also of course, the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on these music projects. Maybe you could share with us and the audience a few highlights. I mean, the key points of your findings that you published in the compendium. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Silja. Of course. We asked all of the 109 projects featured in the compendium whether they had been impacted by COVID, and close to 90%, of course, said yes. And when we drilled down and asked them about whether their activities were still continuing in spite of all of the lockdown and restrictions, the vast majority said yes, which I think is an enormous credit to the musicians who are running these programs, whose livelihoods, if they work in a portfolio career, have been decimated, yet they've still remained committed to continuing these projects in the height of such major challenges. We asked how they'd adapted, and as you would expect, there was a lot of technological innovation, and people saw some major benefits when it came to accessibility and people being able to participate and connect and to reach even wider audiences than you would normally in person. I think a lot of people also recognised the enormous issues of social isolation that were occurring, particularly in marginalised communities, older communities as well, who hadn't seen their families. And that weekly check-in with the choir, although it wasn't particularly musically satisfying on Zoom, was so important for maintaining those social connections, almost acting like a soothing social balm in the lives of those who were participating. And so I think people saw enormous value in continuing the activities, even if they weren't the same as being in person. There was also a lot of heightened creativity. It's amazing when you put restrictions on people how much more creative they become when they've got limited parameters to work with. And I think there was a lot of enormous creativity in the creation of new works and using technology in new ways. That was really interesting to observe and to see. But what we really did find so striking is people have recognized, as the panelists have said, how important music is in our social lives, and it has played such an important social balm, as I said, connecting people. Yet when we look at how governments have valued that, it hasn't quite translated to how people experiencing music have appreciated it. And certainly in Australia and other parts in this region, we've been struck by funding and policies not recognising that valuable role that music has played, where musicians haven't had the same sort of support as other sectors have in the recovery. And so we've really leaned into the Culture 2030 goal campaign statement that Jordi was speaking about the importance of putting culture at the heart of our recovery efforts, certainly in this region that I'm in. And I would argue culture shouldn't be a fourth pillar, it should be the first pillar. Culture should be the central first pillar that the others then flow from, because we recognise that so many of these issues are actually cultural issues that require cultural solutions, and the social and the economic and other areas actually flow from those if we've got the cultural aspects right. So we've really found the work of the Culture 2030 goal campaign very useful in trying to make an argument and point that these music programs have been continuing against all odds, yet our government's actually recognising that contribution in funding and policies in appropriate ways.
Thank you very much, Brydie. Thank you also, as a member of the Culture 20 Goal campaign, for having featured in the compendium our campaign and also the statement that we issued last year. And I believe that at the presentation of the Rome Charter, someone, Jordi, in the audience had indeed also mentioned that culture shouldn't be the fourth pillar, but should indeed be the first pillar. So you join, you are echoing something that is already a little bit in the conversation. Thank you very much, Brydie. Shain, turning to you, I read that one of the statements on the website of the Center for Music Ecosystems reads, "In an ideal world, music would be incorporated into how we plan, develop, and invest in the places we live and the skills we hone. All cities, towns, and places would recognize, map, and invest in their music ecosystems. From working all over the world, developing and advocating for investments and systemic policies to enhance the role and value that music places in communities, we have realized that this is not the case." So I understand that your guide to music and the SDGs is one of your replies. Which are the other replies to this challenge? How can we, what's missing, and how can we make our voice heard?
I think, I think my thinking is, every charity should spend, or NGO, should spend every single day working itself out of business, right? In a perfect world, every charity shouldn't have to exist if they actually succeeded in their goals. So my goal at the center is for it to not exist, because if the world was what I wanted it to be, we wouldn't need the center. It would, and I always think with Save the Children, if we've saved all the children, then it's the same kind of thing. And I feel like when, we don't have, music is not incorporated really at the ground level into how governments think about investing in their citizens. The fact that music education is not globally mandatory. There are countries, there are countries that, let's say, can afford to invest in music education that do not, let alone those that, that have other issues as well that may be more impactful immediately than music education. But still, I believe that every government, regardless of size or stature, should. And going up from that, it's music, when it comes to music and healthy aging, or music and health and social care, there are very few standardized structured programs to really understand and incorporate music into how we treat ourselves or how we invest in healthy aging. And I know that's a privileged thing to say in most places, but I think that there's there's a complete, from my perspective, there's a lack of understanding outside of the music sector and the music world. All of us sitting here, we all get it. We've all drunk the Kool-Aid, but we're the minority. And I don't think that there is yet to be a language that's written or a guide, or which is probably made up of all the things like your 5, you know, which is hugely influential to me, the 5 rights for music, to everything that Jordi does, to Brydie and many others. Whatever we're doing, I don't think it's working at the level I want it to. And it's not about convincing those of us who get it. It's about systemic change, and it's the same large fights that we are having across every one of the SDGs, across, you know, and again, it comes back to what Brydie said. I don't think that we have to be intentional about music for music's sake. That's the thing that I feel that we have to incorporate music more into other decisions that are being made. So my argument is how do we create better, you know, more developed, more supportive, more human individuals while we incorporate music into their education? How do we create people who care about gender equality? We teach them music as well as everything else. And this comes back to, you know, my day job in the commercial music industry. It's not an equitable framework in many regards. It's you know, many artists are not being paid fairly for their work because of the way that systems are set up. And in order for us to change that and make it more artist-centric, we have to explain how people make money out of music, because most people have no idea. They just listen to the radio and that's it. And so our objective with the center is to try to explain as best as possible, using the SDGs as a guide, how music is incorporated into the decisions that we make to improve ourselves as humans. And that includes decisions around land, decisions around climate, decisions around education policy, health and social care, and so on and so forth. And I think that this is a life's work, right? This is not something that's going to be changed immediately. This is, I guess, all our life's work. And I'm hoping that the center can be, over time, in a considered and complementary and unbiased way, a supportive and positive role in that. And I'm still trying to figure out what that means. So for everyone here, I welcome all thoughts, opinions, constructive criticism, because I want to make the center valuable for everybody and everything. I don't want it to just be something that exists that isn't providing, you know, positive impact for the entire ecosystem. I hope I answered the question. I'm not sure I did.
Well, you did. Thank you very much, Shain. I think what I would like to take out of what you just said is this need for systemic change, and systemic change needs frameworks, needs policy frameworks. And I would like to take this to the very high level, to the intergovernmental organizations level. And my question to all of you is, how can we cooperate at this level with intergovernmental organizations? What is your experience with these organizations? And also to Marina, then, from the point of view of the UN SDG Action Network, what do you think is needed from our side to make this cooperation really effective and efficient? So who would like to start? Marina, please start.
I can start, and I really agree to to what Shain just said about we need to change the system, and somehow as a campaigner we have a strategy to find, so that music, we have a dilemma. So music, in theory, you have the largest audience, people everywhere listen to music, but at the same time, we need to be able to leverage the the music to also convey some messages that are very important and that are about the complexity. You know, people listen to music. Let's try to find either advocate within the, you know, the music industry, or maybe use music to also explain the complexity. And I think that we can leverage music to also explain how music or the music industry work or could be changed to. And you know, I don't have the solution, but somehow we should be able to leverage music to also explain the changes that are needed. And similarly, I mean, we've seen there is a similar debate about the vaccination and the copyright. So they understand that people are now more used to the complexity of their society. And we need to explain the complexity, how the music industry works, the imbalances, and how everyone can somehow play a role.
Thank you, Marina, to share your point of view.
I think it's fascinating because I spend most of my day talking to people who don't care. So, you know, you guys do, which is fantastic. But it is honestly, that would be 80% of my day explaining how music works, because there are two sides. So on one side, on the social side, we all take it for granted because it's a natural resource. It just exists. It's part of our life. We're born with an instrument. We can all sing, some of us badly, like me. But we just completely take it for granted because it's there. And I use the analogy of clean water, right? You turn on the tap and you take a drink of water. You have no idea what went into that moment happening. We just take it for granted that clean water came out of our tap, and we're all lucky that we have that. And then on the industrial side, on the commercial side of music, it's such a complex system because intellectual property is something you can't see. You know, you can see a house, you can see a road, you can see a building. You can't see music, and we have cultural differences where some people believe that, you know, music is a community initiative and some economic initiative. So the problem is the complex internal mechanisms of music, both how we experience it, how we take it for granted, and then how, if we choose to, make money out of it, is something that's really hard to explain to someone who doesn't care. So so that's why the SDGs are so important, because people care about them. So, you know, and when you're in the music industry, from my perspective, you get obsessed with the internal workings of it, how much a stream is worth, and you completely forget about the value that music brings to people just who don't work in it. And that's why the intergovernmental community focuses on the celebration of music, right? You have a benefit concert and that's it, because the entire ecosystem of how that happens is taken for granted because the benefit concert's going to happen. So in order to change that, we have to explain how this all works in plain English or Spanish or French or whatever language we speak, and then explain that it's not that complicated, but if we don't invest in it, then everything is threatened, right? And if everything is threatened, then the thing that we take for granted most, the ability to participate, the ability to experience music in one way or another, even that will be threatened. Because most of that now is essentially sitting on multinational company servers and not controlled by us, controlled by, you know, organizations that have different objectives. So I think the first thing that we need to do is have a framework in the intergovernmental community that explains what a music ecosystem is across all these objectives: social, economic, environmental, cultural, so on. And that, again, is not definitive, but it's a way to have an argument that's based on facts, based on a structure. And I think that we all have elements of that already, but I don't think that it's been explained to people who don't care. I think it's been explained to people who do. And that's, if we change that, and that's why I'm so excited to be working with like you, Marina, because you're from a world that doesn't care in that sense, and now is beginning to care. And I mean that in a very positive way. And still the World Bank does not care. The IMF does not care. These other organizations, but if we can see these types of thoughts and explanations into it, and we explain why it's important to care, and that it's not about music, it's about everybody, it's about everything, it's about human development. Music's just a part of it. Then I believe that we'll be successful. I'll stop now.
Thank you, Shain. Thank you for this this call to everybody to explain better what this intangible, this invisible thing about music. And once again, we're going back to what you said at the beginning, explain the value of music to everybody, also to people who don't care. However, you said something, you said the music as a natural resource. And if I'm not mistaken, this was the beginning of the compendium idea, which is now called music as a global resource. And you, Brydie, with this compendium really go directly into the UN General Assembly, I think, to make your voice heard and to explain what the value of music is through your compendium, through the project that you have been featuring in your compendium.
That's right, Silja. And my co-editor, Barbara Hesse, who's been so involved right from the beginning, would be able to talk through the progression from music as a natural resource to a global resource. But as you say, the purpose there is to do exactly what Shain's been talking about and Marina's talking about, speaking to the UN explicitly and through a framework that makes really clear how the intentions of these music programs actually deliver on the outcomes that they seek to achieve. But I completely agree that we still need to do so much work in terms of understanding how the intentions of a music program actually lead to the outcomes that we're talking about, and then how they actually flow upstream to systemic change. I agree with Shain, we need a framework that acknowledges the complexity of how music works and can look at those stages of change or impact in multiple dimensions across multiple timescales, where we might come to a better understanding of how the individual or interpersonal changes that might come about from participating in music can actually flow upstream to some of the big, more macro systemic claims that programs might make about their particular music projects. What we've sort of found is a music program will say, this helps combat racism. Play this music with us and it will cure racism, without any kind of concept of how the individual participation can actually lead to systemic change. So I agree there are calls for a framework that can understand these different domains and degrees and dimensions of change, and also to understand that in music things happen across different timescales. Big bang impact might take years and years and years, but in music there are so many small, incremental, tiny, almost invisible changes that will happen in the moment of making music that can add up to something that's so much more significant and can actually lead to broader systemic change. Our research has also shown that there are multiple changes that can all be happening simultaneously in the moment of music. When you've got an audience coming and listening to musicians, and their perceptions around a particular social issue might be changing. And so my response here to what Shain has just said is just to echo that need for a framework and a way of explaining and translating the value and the outcomes of music, because we need to be doing this across sectors. I've certainly seen in the health sector and a range of other social sectors, they just don't get it. And we're having to bend and use their language without having a strong language of our own that really shows the complexity of how music works. So I really echo the need for that. And I see forums like this, the organisations like the ones we're all involved in, really need to be working hand in hand together around this language and these frameworks and ways of looking at the complexity of music across multiple dimensions.
Thank you very much, Brydie. Jordi, would you like to reply to this question too? And maybe in your reply, also consider the question that I saw on the chat from Angela Impey, which reads, do you think we have a better possibility to leverage our cause by focusing on culture rather than music, which might be too narrow? That said, are we referring to art? And if so, how does this represent creative expression that is embedded and not conceptualized as a specialist activity or commodity?
That's a very difficult question, Angela.
which you could also, if you wish, don't feel sorry for asking difficult questions.
No, of course
you
not.
could also more elaborate in the Wonder Me session when you, dear audience, are able to meet the speakers and elaborate a little bit more. But Jordi, please, the floor is yours.
Yes. Let me first echo what Ian Smith said. We need to more effectively target the political power brokers and decision makers and never tire of doing so. Exactly. We need champions. We need political champions. In 2013, there was just one country promoting a culture goal, a country of music, Cuba. We need many countries in all regions promoting one culture goal or two culture goals in the post-2030 development agenda, perhaps one for the arts and one for heritage. We have analyzed in detail the 169 targets and the indicators, and half of them provide, numbers and deadlines and narratives, formulations that we are able to provide as well. It is a matter of being more strategic and identifying those countries that are already working in that direction, analyzing the impact of culture, music, in their development programs, and formulate very clear, goalable and global phrases. We are not that far, but we need the political brokers to follow what we say, and we also need to do our homework. The voice of the civil society needs to be louder, stronger, bolder. The question of Angela, yes, I think so. It is a bit better to focus on culture, not only on music, but why not? And yes, it is the arts, but also many other areas in which the presence of music and the arts is present in life. Let me take the example of health. It is now obvious the relation between well-being and participation in cultural life. This is something that we have to address. It does not understand culture, music as a specialist activity or commodity, but as something that it is fundamental to well-being. So I can explain more, or I will try to explain more, Angela, in Wonder. See you there in a minute.
Thank you very much, Jordi, for inviting to continue the conversation. Marina, I would like you to maybe prepare in your head in the next 2 minutes a little mot de conclusion, as we say in French. And in the meantime, I give the floor to Brydie. Brydie, I would like to know, I saw in your compendium conclusions, you say there's still much work to do. The projects featured in this compendium clearly underscore the important contributions that the power of music makes in helping to achieve many of the SDGs on the local, regional, and national levels. But while the outcomes of these projects are both impressive and significant, in the main, their impact on organizational and political decision makers still remains very limited. So it's the connection to what we're just seeing. So in your view, from your conclusions of the companion, what needs to be done?
Thanks, Silja. I think what needs to be done connects to the conversation we've just had. From what I've observed, there is still enormous fragmentation in this broad field of work. And that's because so many of these music initiatives that really target SDGs and broader social impact gain their meaning on a local level. Like we said at the very beginning, that cultural localization. But what that means is there's enormous fragmentation where all of these projects are happening and they're not connecting up on a macro level. We also see in research in this field, there's tremendous fragmentation where silos are happening between different disciplines and approaches, and people are not joining the dots on a macro level. And it's also happening in the policy space. And so what we're doing is we're not allowing ourselves to advocate in any kind of collective major way. And I think this fragmentation is really holding us back. And this really resonates strongly with what the other panelists have said and what Shain was talking about before, about us needing to really find a collective voice together. And so I think there is a great role for the IMC, Silja, and the European Music Forum and these other organisations that can bring together all of these different parts of the sector, the practitioners, the policy makers, other sectors that have a vested interest, researchers, so that we move beyond this current fragmentation that's really holding us back, I think, from real impact in places like the UN and other areas like that. And so I think we need to address that fragmentation before we can move forward.
Thank you, Brydie. I think this is indeed the role of organizations such as the International Music Council, but also the European Music Council at a European level, which already brings together a wide range of stakeholders from the music sector, but also which try to converge the great diversity of voices in the European music sector through the European Agenda of Music. So there are already a lot of initiatives and the efforts are there. I guess it's time to just upscale our work, our advocacy work, and really much more efficiently and effectively talk and engage with what Ian said, political power brokers and decision makers. So this is not the end of the conversation, because we will continue. You panelists will have a table in the Wonder Me area space to engage and interact with our audience. But Marina, as promised, I give you the floor for the last word, for the conclusion for this panel, which was really, really exciting. I was very happy to moderate. Thank you very much to all the panelists. And Marina, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Very difficult to summarize, but just a couple of points that are the most important, I believe, take away. First, we need a global framework. I think this was very well explained from the different angle, and a framework that helps, as was just said, to fight somehow the fragmentation and to align with decision maker at the various levels. Then a second question, more open, and maybe in the small group we can go down, is how music should be the overarching framework, or how maybe music should be part of the larger culture, framework that we also need, very, very strongly. And at the same time, because music is so much part of who we are, how we can really leverage the fact that music, differently from other sectors, which are very technical, doesn't need to be explained. So how we leverage the fact that everybody listens to music, everybody loves music, everybody is so familiar with music to create some action that then we can have a bottom up. You have a framework, but then you'll need people demanding for more music and for the changes in the system that are required to make music accessible and to make music more powerfully, structure in our life and society. So I'll stop here, but thank you.
Thank you very much, Marina. Once again, for this conclusion, once again, the conversation is not over, and invite you, dear panelists. Thank you very, very much for joining me in this panel. I learned a lot. Thank you very much. And I invite the audience to join us all in the networking space in WonderMe. Thank you, and see you soon.